Okay. Hello, welcome. My culture area was Kyiv, Ukraine, and I paid special attention to the way that religious institutions and shifts in political powers influence the musical developments. Now, the history of Ukraine is an incredibly old one. Archaeological evidence reveals that hominins have resided in the region dating all the way back to the late Paleolithic. The city of Kyiv is said to have had its origins in 482 CE. Legend states that the city was the product of three Polyanian brothers, Kai, Shek, and Koriv. Purportedly, each brother had their own settlement, which later unified to create the single city of Kyiv. Kyiv can be found nestled along the Dnieper River. Its oldest portions, those along the western bank of the river, are hilly. And more modernly, Kyiv has expanded and now extends into the flatter floodplain along the eastern bank. The early Kievan peoples were primarily agrarian in nature, subsisting on farming and the raising of livestock. Local tribes would have had cultural contact with numerous other peoples through trading. For example, the Scythians, Sarmatians, Khazars, and Greeks. Kyiv's place as a cultural center is very much linked to the emergence of the East Slavic state Kievan Rus, which was said to have been founded by the Viking Oleg of Novgorod in 879 CE. Oleg's rule oversaw the mingling of multiple Slavic and Finnish tribes, as well as early trade relations with the Byzantine Empire. Oleg's son, Igor, strengthened the Kievan relationship with the Byzantine Empire by overseeing the collection of tributes, which were then taken to Constantinople via the Dnieper River. In 945, a tribe of peoples called the Drevlianians of Khorestan assassinated Prince Igor while he was moving through the land to collect these tributes. Seeking to avenge his death, Igor's wife, Saint Olga of Kyiv, hunted down and slayed the pagan Drevlianians, though at the time she was still a pagan herself. Now, because she and Igor's son, Sviatoslav Igorovich, was still a minor at the time of his father's death, Olga served as regent. Under Olga's rule, Kievan Rus saw a strengthening of political power and the institution of new financial administrative systems in the region. This was partially to prevent further assassinations during tribute collection, as was the cause of her husband Igor's demise. Now, in either 955 or 957, the exact time and place is debated, Olga converted to Orthodox Christianity and became the first Kievan ruler to claim Christianity as their faith. This, of course, would have fallen during a period of ongoing tensions between Christian and pagan peoples of Kyiv. Again, recall her husband's assassination. Now, despite Olga's efforts to get her son, Sviatoslav, to convert to Christianity, he would remain pagan. But he was at least tolerant of Christians, and the Christian population of the region grew under his reign. That is to say, while there may have been tensions between religious groups, there was at least some degree of coexistence. They occupied the same region. And Sviatoslav had multiple sons of his own. One in particular would leave Kievan Rus into a new era. That specific son was Vladimir of Novgorod, and he was who instituted Christianity as the official religion of Kievan Rus, following his own baptism in 987. There's a lot that could be speculated about this conversion. Perhaps there was some influence from his grandmother Olga's own Christian conversion. Some scholarship points to Vladimir's conversion as a political strategy, that Vladimir may have seen the institution of monotheistic religions, namely Islam and Christianity, as allowing for the consolidation of power in states that were neighboring to Kievan Rus. Regardless of what the exact motivators were, One critical element of this conversion was the influence the Byzantine Empire had in this Christianization of Kievan Rus. Scholar Arkady Zhukovsky notes, quote, "The Christianization of Rus was essentially engineered by Byzantium. Byzantium supplied the first hierarchs and other missionary clergy in Rus and introduced Byzantine art, education, and literature there." Following Vladimir's institution of Christianity as the state religion, the Christian church would gradually grow in Kyiv and throughout the region. Over time, churches and monasteries would become centers of learning, centers for the arts and culture. During Vladimir's lifetime, the first and largest stone church of Kyiv, the Church of Tithes, was erected. This was the result of a collaboration between Kievan and Byzantine artisans between the years 989 and 996. Under Vladimir's son, Yaroslav the Wise, construction began for St. Sophia's Cathedral. Aside from its obvious religious functions, the cathedral also served as a more general community center. It was the site of coronation ceremonies, it was a place to receive foreign ambassadors, and it housed the first library and scriptorium in Kievan Rus. St. Sophia's Cathedral also features a vast array of frescoes and mosaics, most notably including the depiction of the Virgin Orans in the chancel and the Pantocrator in the central cupola. However, there are also images of music making. Both the north and south towers of the cathedral depict specific types of secular music making that both illustrate the types of instruments used at the time and also further highlight the role that Byzantium had in the emergence of Christianity in Kyiv. The specific types of musicians that were depicted were called skomaroki, and they could be compared to the French jongleurs, if you are familiar. The specific instruments that were depicted in these tower frescoes included an organ, cymbals, flutes and pipes, a lute-like string instrument, and either a harp or psaltery. And again, connecting to Byzantium, very similar depictions of skomaroki can be seen at the base of the obelisk of Theodosius, which stands at the site of the Hippodrome of Constantinople. Now, for context, the Hippodrome was a massive arena, one with the ability to hold over 60,000 spectators, and was most notably used for horse racing, but also had numerous other sporting events, entertainment, and social or political happenings. Another product of the growing Christian church in Ukraine was the establishment of monasteries and church brotherhoods. In Kyiv, this can be seen in the establishment of the Kievan Cave Monastery, which originally was quite literally a set of caves in which St. Anthony of the Caves and other monastics took up residence. Over time, more caves would be dug out, a church was built over top, and a printing press was established. Music at the Kievan Cave Monastery was shaped by musicians called domestveniki, who were brought in from Greece and Bulgaria, of course, each bringing with them their own unique musical traditions. As more musicians came to the monastery, the musical tradition grew, and what began as an oral tradition eventually expanded to one that could be transmitted in writing, as notational styles like kondak and znameni allowed for chants to be written down and preserved in church collections. Now, if we move a little bit further west, over to Lviv, the Lviv Dormition Brotherhood played a similar role, functioning as a center of knowledge and culture. They also had a significant printing press, and the Lviv Dormition Brotherhood's printing output included printed liturgical books, primers, poetry, drama, and theological, educational, and polemical literature. The Lviv Dormition Brotherhood also established a school, of which music was a significant part of the curriculum. In particular, polyphonic choral styles would be important points of study. As the school grew, more musicians were recruited, specifically from poor urban areas, and the school would cement itself as a musical center. So our first musical example we have is from the album 1000 Years of Ukrainian Sacred Music, and it was recorded in 2008 by the Kyiv Chamber Choir. This particular track features two stikra, which are short hymn settings that were used in Orthodox Christian services, particularly in Vespers and Matins. Both of these were from the medieval period and are by an anonymous composer. So let's listen to a little bit of that. Much as I hate to cut that off, for time's sake, let's keep rolling. So, moving to the Cossack era. By the 18th century, another important musical trend would begin to emerge. In the way that brotherhoods and monasteries functioned in sacred Ukrainian spaces, guilds functioned as a more secular social structure. Now, guilds were small, self-governed entities, often with their own banner, and united by common religious beliefs or professions. From these guilds emerged a tradition of blind, itinerant singers called kobzars. As political powers would evolve, kobzars would become further and further socially ostracized. The kobzars were known to play several instruments, including the kobza and bandura. Now, the kobza is a fretless stringed instrument in the lute family that dates back as far as the 11th century in Ukraine, though it didn't really surge in popularity until the 16th century. Closely related is the bandura, which is larger, has a longer neck, and more strings. Historically, banduras were constructed with wood bodies and featured 32 all the way up to 55 strings. They fall into two categories, Chernihiv and Kharkiv banduras, each of which has its own slightly distinct playing style. It is perhaps worth noting that these are two different instruments, though there are plenty of examples where the terminology has been used interchangeably. The kobzar songs were very much linked to Cossack culture. While the song texts featured a variety of themes, which included history, religion, and folk themes, the music, in a broad sense, functioned as a morale booster for the Cossack army. One specific form of kobzar song was the Duma, which was considered so powerful that it was known to incite revolts, which subsequently led to the execution of certain kobzar performers. Now, the Cossack identity is one that had a particular set of connotations. The Cossack is what one scholar calls a historical prototype. Alyssa Ballard Lynn likens the Cossack archetype to that of knights, pirates, samurai, and cowboys of other world cultures, each of which embodies strength, adventure, and other values central to the respective cultural identity. The term Cossack itself is one of Turkic origin, rooted in the word Kazak, meaning free man. In a very simplistic way, the label was attached to those that had no other clear place in society, and then moved out into the steppes, which was a place with no figures of authority. However, the actual identity becomes something far more nuanced than that. Ukrainian Cossacks in specific are tied to various political struggles, namely with Tatars and Turks, Polish magnates, and the broader push for Ukrainian independence. Connotatively, Cossacks are associated with bravery, strength, independence, patriotism, and a broad Ukrainian nationalism. The overlap of Cossack masculinity and music is evident in depictions of Cossack mamai. Throughout the 17th through 20th centuries, the folkloric figure, Cossack mamai, was illustrated across various art mediums. While each artist, of course, presents Cossack mamai in their own unique style, there are many facets of Cossack mamai that are consistent across depictions. For one, he is almost always seen sitting in a cross-legged position, is often holding a bandura, and is typically donning a long mustache. In the scene around him are typically his horse, who is often tied to his spear, and a sword or gun, either laying on the ground or hanging close by. Paintings of Cossack mamai were often done by anonymous itinerant artists who would then sell them at markets. Then these paintings were then copied by peasant artists who would add details of their own local life. Now, it seems significant that the focal point of these depictions is the bandura. The music making is thus very clearly linked with the Cossack identity. An example of a Kobzar song we have from an album recorded in 1961 on Folkways Records and performed by Paul Konoplenko Zaporizets. The specific track is called Baida, an old Duma, and is an arrangement of a ballad that tells the story of a 16th century prince, Baida Vishnevetsky. The liner notes for this album note, "At that time there were battles between Turkey and Ukraine. In one of these combats he was captured. The Sultan said that if Baida would give up his native land and faith, he would get in return the Sultan's daughter in marriage, honors, and wealth. But Baida categorically refused this offer and would rather die than be a traitor to his country, Ukraine." So let's listen to a little bit of that.
Ой, п'є Байда мед горілочку, та не годну нічку, та не годиночку, та не годну нічку, та не годиночку. Прийшов до нього цар турецький, ой, що ж ти ж робиш, Байдо молодецький, ой, що ж ти ж робиш, Байдо молодецький. Ой, п'ю царю горілочку, та не годну нічку, та не годиночку, та не годну нічку, та не годиночку. Поки не Байдо, байдувати, сватай мою дочку, та йди царювати, сватай мою дочку, та йди царювати.
Again, well, I hate to have to cut that off. For time's sake, let's keep moving. So, Another example of religious or political change as a factor in Ukrainian musical identity is currently unfolding. In February 2022, Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. As of February 24th, 2026, the Global Conflict Tracker states that Russia currently occupies approximately 20% of Ukraine. Despite foreign aid, the invasion has caused massive humanitarian crisis, with close to 56,000 civilian casualties, 3.7 million people displaced, and 5.9 million with refugee status. As of June 25th, 2025, UNESCO reports that 501 cultural sites and 4,163 educational institutions have been damaged or destroyed in Ukraine since the Russian invasion in 2022. So not only has there been obvious exponential harm done to the peoples and infrastructure of Ukraine, but the arts have been facing the consequences of the Russian occupation as well. Reporter Jane Aroff, who was then with the New York Times, documented some of the ways that the arts in Ukraine were facing the ongoing war. Initially, many precious works of arts were removed from their respective galleries to be stored away safe from Russian airstrikes. However, as an overt act of resistance, some community leaders have worked to turn things back around and to make Ukrainian art accessible again. Taras Wozniak, the director of the Lviv National Art Gallery, responded to the Russian invasion stating, quote, "Life does not stop," end quote. Not only did Wozniak plan to reopen exhibits, but also discuss having exhibits available online, or, if funding permitting, having exhibition spaces built underground, thus safe from Russian airstrikes. Aroff's article also cites artists Vlada Ralko and Vladimir Budnikov, who donated works, some depicting the war itself, to be displayed at the museum in Lviv. Other markers of Ukrainian resistance through the arts can be seen in the University of Notre Dame's Nanovich Institute, which assembled the exhibition titled Ukrainian Art as Protest and Resilience, as a means of protest on the year anniversary of Russia's invasion. The exhibition features multiple art mediums, including but not limited to body art, video, digital art, paintings, and music. One featured portion of this exhibition is that by professional violinist Vera Lidovchenko, who performed the Ukrainian folk song Nishyaka Misechna from her bomb shelter in her basement, only days after the Kharkiv City Opera Theater, where she professionally performed, had been destroyed by a Russian missile strike. This performance also, of course, comes after many years of a long and complicated musical history with numerous Russian and Soviet efforts to censor Ukrainian musical tradition. On the more overtly musical side of things, another example would be the work being done by Ukrainian musical group Dacha Bracha. The group performs a unique hybrid of both world musical styles and those that are distinctly Ukrainian, using elements of old and new, and creating something that the group calls ethnic chaos. The group is staunch in their anti-Putin position. Reflecting on the group's mission in a 2025 interview with Ukraine World magazine, member Marko Halinovich states, quote, "Every day I become more convinced that I am in the right place and doing it effectively. Concerts are a form of cultural diplomacy. We often receive feedback from Ukrainian ambassadors and diplomats telling us that our performances are incredibly important, impactful, and effective. This reassures me that I am doing what needs to be done. Though only a small snapshot of the current artists in Ukraine, there is an obvious push by Ukrainian artists to create art, to display art, and to communicate a distinctly Ukrainian resilience during the ongoing military conflict." So, with Dacha Bracha in mind, let's listen to a bit of their NPR Tiny Desk concerts, where they have 3 numbers. We'll listen to a bit of the first. The texts of these songs are rooted in folkloric imagery, so they're modern interpretations, but still have clear folk themes. Again, for time's sake, I will have to cut it off there, but I will have the items linked at the end of the presentation. Just as a conclusion, hopefully it's clear by now that Ukraine's history is long and storied. It has been a space of cultural contact between tribal groups, between religious groups, and between political powers. Neither Ukraine's religious history or political factions alone could have shaped Ukrainian music into what it is today. We have lots of references to be cited. And by a lot, I mean a lot. And then here are some ways that you can access the remainder of those recordings.